No cameras, no confessionals. Just a stark silence in the Flagstaff courthouse as everything the public thought they knew about the Brown family was brought crashing down. Kody Brown stiffly sat, 4 marriages, years of performing, and an empire crumbling on his back like a verdict waiting to be read. Behind him, Robyn's shoulders slumped, her eyes red, rimmed not from tears this time, but from exhaustion, denial, or both. The courtroom was packed, not with bystanders but with witnesses to a story that had been playing out for over a decade on television screens, now stripped of TLC lighting and laid bare in legal papers and emotional ruin. Christine was seated at the other table, her binder, yes, that binder, shut in front of her like a closed tomb of all Kody hoped would remain buried. But this wasn't Christine's battle alone now. Janelle was beside her to the right, and for the first time her face wasn't conflicted or confused. It was determined. Meri lingered in the back, torn in stance but not in attendance. The judge leaned forward, reading the final page of a thick financial affidavit before speaking words that echoed like shots in a cathedral. Mr. Brown, this court has read the documents filed by your former wives, and I must ask directly, were these financial decisions made under full consent? The silence was surgical. Kody's jaw muscles clenched, his mouth opened but nothing came out. The breakdown was not heard. It didn't explode. It crawled, quietly, like rot beneath the wallpaper of a once gorgeous house. Christine cleared her throat. Your Honor, this isn't about money. It is about manipulation. Season 19 was the public breakdown, but what happens now in Season 20 is the reckoning. That is when the courtroom shifted, because the audience didn't come back for another season of reality television. They were present for the demise of the illusion. The mood in the room changed the instant Christine slowly opened her binder. Its spine creaked as if it were mourning what it was about to divulge. This courtroom may not have been unfamiliar with that blue cover or the color-coded tabs sticking out like honed blades before, but all who sat there knew that this time would be different. This wasn't about living in the past, this was about putting it to rest. Tab 19, Christine said matter of factly, sliding the page protector over to the clerk. This is from Season 19's taping cycle. It is a notarized copy of our joint TLC payout agreement, signed by all of us, except the deposit records show only 2 names received full shares. Mine and Robyn's. The courtroom quieted. The kind of silence that has heft, Robyn straightened. The shock preceding shame could mask it. Kody's eyes narrowed, his lips a tight line. This isn't what you think, he snarled, but the judge leaned forward. Then tell me. Christine didn't let him. She turned another page. Each tab a year, each paper a receipt, a scar, a secret truth. We were led to believe we were in debt, she continued, but Season 19 filmed in 3 locations, 2 of which were new houses purchased under Robyn's name, cash paid. Robyn's mouth opened to deny, but she didn't. Not this time, because Christine had brought the records of the wire transfers, and Janelle, introverted, strategic Janelle, had brought the screenshots. Season 19 had shown the world a man unraveling emotionally, but now the court was seeing what was underneath that unraveling: diversions, omissions, and manipulation masquerading as leadership. The judge nodded once. Enter these as Exhibit E. Kody did not move. He seemed smaller now, not because he was losing, but because the performance was failing. And Season 20, it wasn't going to be about polygamy anymore. It was going to be about accountability. No one expected her to bring audio again. Not after the shockwaves her recordings had caused 2 months ago, when she'd taped Kody whispering with Robyn about laundering money through cleaner accounts, and how optics are more important than fairness. But Christine had bided her time, planned, and now she calmly pulled a small black USB from her binder and slid it across the table. This was recorded during Season 19's production break, she said, voice level. It was the night Kody set all of us down and said we were going to rebuild the family together. What he did not know is that just 48 hours earlier he had made a private call to the executive producer at TLC. She nodded to the court technician. The judge nodded, and the speakers burst to life. Not with static, but with Kody's familiar voice, crisp and confident. We can't have them watching everything fall apart. I need more Robyn footage. Play the loyalty card. The others? We make it look like they drifted. A pause. Christine particularly. She is already packing. Make her look selfish. The room reconfigured itself. Christine didn't blink. Janelle's knuckles whitened. Meri looked at the floor, and Robyn. Robyn was muttering something under her breath, like she was praying or falling apart. "Stop," said the judge. "Mr. Brown, is this your voice?" Kody didn't respond. "Mr. Brown?" the judge asked again. "Yes," Kody finally said, low and bitter. "But it is not what it looks like." Christine didn't flinch. "It sounds exactly like what it is," she said. "Manipulation." Season 19 had provided us with glimpses of this, edited montages of icy rejections and staged reconciliations. But now, the lie had a voice of its own. The judge leaned back, Exhibit F. And while outside the press struggled for signal and headlines, inside, the truth was beginning to take its rightful place, because Season 20, Christine would later claim, wasn't an extension, it was a confrontation, and the court wasn't watching a television show. It was watching a reckoning. Most of Season 19, Meri was a ghost. She floated through scenes, present but not present, speaking in careful snippets, her eyes holding decades of decisions she hadn't quite claimed or disavowed. She was still in the courtroom, arms crossed, immobile, not near Christine or Kody, not behind Robyn, but in a liminal space of belonging and finally breaking away. Until now, Christine had just played the recording. Janelle stared forward as if she was watching a wall fall down in slow motion. Robyn hadn't spoken a word since the audio ended. Her hands clenched together in her lap, jaw tight. And Kody, he sat like a man whose spine had been replaced with sand. "Your Honor," a voice said softly from the back. Everyone turned. It was Meri. She stood slowly, as if speaking these words would rewrite her entire history. "I'd like to testify." Kody's head whipped toward her. "Meri," he hissed, but the judge raised a hand. "Go on." She stepped ahead, her heels snapping against the shined floor like time itself was catching up. "I remember that night," she said. "When shooting finished, Kody said he was rebuilding, but he never asked what we needed. He asked what would look good on camera." She dipped into her handbag and pulled out a folded document, which she handed to the clerk. "This is an email from the show's coordinator. It is dated 2 weeks before that speech, and it outlines new storylines Kody approved, including one where he and Robyn appear to lead the rest of us in family healing." Christine's lips curled in what wasn't a smile, precisely, but something fiercer, confirmation. The judge read the email, "And you were not made aware of this plan." "Not once," Meri said. "Season 19 made me look like I didn't care, like I'd given up, but I was waiting, still hoping he'd notice me again, but Kody never rebuilt anything. He was making a script." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was grief. Grief for the years Meri spent believing she was part of a love that had long been recycled for profit. Robyn whispered something again, too softly to be audible. Janelle looked over at Meri, her eyes gleaming, and Christine. She didn't need to say a word, because the truth doesn't need a defense, it only needs a voice. And finally, Meri had found hers. Season 20 wasn't going to be 4 wives fighting to make it work through Kody. It was going to be 3 women learning to live without him. And at what price? No one called her. No one summoned. But Robyn stood anyway. Not because she was ready, but because silence had become too much to carry. Season 19 had spent a whole arc showing her as the last loyal wife, the peacemaker, the martyr who held the family together while the rest of them strayed. But in this courtroom, under oath, under fluorescent lighting that neither flattered nor hid, Robyn Brown wasn't a character. She was a player. And now she was accountable. The judge looked up, a bit surprised. "Do you wish to testify, Mrs. Brown?" Robyn nodded. Yet her eyes already betrayed the panic forming. "Yes, Your Honor." She walked to the witness stand in slow, hesitant steps, like she was walking to the edge of a cliff she could no longer evade. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clenched jaw and glare fixed on her as though he could scare her off with a look. But Robyn didn't look at him. She looked at Christine. "I didn't know," she began. Her voice trembled, and not in the way it had during her confessional segments. This wasn't scripted anguish, it was exposure. "I didn't know how far it went. Kody told me the other wives did not wish to be included in the finances. He said they left. Christine did not move. Janelle crossed her arms, waiting. Meri's eyes did not blink. The judge raised an eyebrow. You had separate payments, did you not? Robyn hesitated. Yes. You had multiple properties while others resided in rentals? Yes. And your name is on LLC filings connected with Brown Legacy Ventures, isn't it? He asked. Another hesitation. I was told it was for tax reasons. I never read the full filings. The courtroom constricted. This wasn't the confession the crowd had gathered to see. This was something else. Something worse. Willful ignorance masquerading as loyalty. Christine stood up. May I address the witness, Your Honor? The judge nodded. Christine stepped forward, not with venom, but with finality. You didn't ask, Robyn. You never asked. Not once. When we cried, you blinked. When we begged for answers, you nodded and said it would be okay. But you knew. Maybe not the numbers. Maybe not the shell companies. But you knew the math didn't add up. You knew we were disappearing, and you let it happen so he'd never loosen his hold on you. Robyn's mouth moved. A ragged breath in, then nothing. No tears, just unraveling, not of a woman fainting, but of a woman who no longer had a script to recite. The judge leaned back, taking note of her testimony. This court will review your filings more carefully. You may step down. Robyn sat down again, smaller than she had been before. Not hated, not cast out, but revealed. And she sat beside Kody, and for the first time in years she did not take his hand because in season 20, not even the favorite wife will be safe from the fallout. The judge remained silent for what seemed like a very long time after Robyn had sat down. He simply stared at the manila folder on his desk, the folded corners from the thickness of whatever material was inside. Mrs. Brown, he spoke finally, returning his gaze to Christine. Your affidavit states there are properties not disclosed in divorce cases. Can you explain that on the record? Christine nodded and opened a new section of her binder, which was labeled simply Dalton. Tension in the courtroom wrapped itself as tightly as wire around bone. Yes, Your Honor, she reported, pushing forward a page covered with photocopies of 3 deeds recorded under a name soon to be famous, Kevin Dalton. This alias was created in season 18's off-camera hours, she continued. It's tied to 2 vacation homes in Utah and a luxury cabin in Wyoming, none of which were disclosed during asset division. The courtroom, already stunned into silence, seemed to compress inward. Kody's shoulders twitched. Robyn blinked too fast. Janelle leaned forward, whispering something to her attorney. Meri's lips curled, whether in disbelief or delayed validation was unclear. Christine flipped another page. All 3 properties were purchased through a secondary LLC. Dalton Properties LLC, under a Flagstaff address shared with the same P.O. box that Kody uses for Brown Legacy Ventures. The judge's pen paused mid-note. Mr. Brown, he said slowly, do you not own these properties? Kody snorted through his nose loudly. They weren't marital assets. They were for expansion of business, future projects. So why the alias? The judge asked bluntly. Why the P.O. Box mail? Why address LLCs not heretofore revealed? Christine was impassive. Because he knew, she said, that if we found them, we'd know that everything else he was telling us was a lie. The judge nodded, then waved toward the court clerk. I am subjecting these properties to immediate investigation. If this is true, this court will follow through on asset seizure until a forensic team can appraise. Kody's voice did rise for the first time, his tone strained and steely. You can't do that. Those are never going to be used for. But the judge cut him off. This is not a television reunion, Mr. Brown. It is a search for the law. Out in the world did not know that the fake breakdown exposed in season 19 was only the beginning. But here in this room, the truth was not just spilling over, it was overflowing. And in season 20, it won't be Christine, Janelle, or Meri trying to fix. It'll be Kody, thriving on the ruins of the empire he tried to keep hidden. For a moment, the lights even appeared to dim. The judge had only just signed the decree for the investigation of the Dalton estates, and Kody's usual swagger had turned into muttered protests and shaking fingers. But the court had yet to be treated to the worst of Christine's evidence, because Janelle was on the verge of revealing to them something so outrageous, so brazenly criminal, that even Christine's binder receded into the background. Your Honor, Janelle said, standing without invitation. I've been quiet long enough. She reached into a slim folder separate from Christine's master file and pulled out a single document, a notarized transfer of ownership form for a property on the edge of Coyote Pass, dated 6 months after her official separation from Kody. This is the deed to the East Ridge parcel, she continued, her voice tougher than ever before. It was put into Robyn's name using my counterfeit signature. She glared at Kody. That signature is not mine. The collective gasp that swept through the courtroom wasn't drama. It was instinctual. Even the court reporter gazed up, lips slightly parted, fingers frozen above the keys. We had a forensic expert examine it, Janelle continued, handing the judge the affidavit that had been lab tested. The ink pressure patterns and angle are not from my signature. The notarized notary has never worked in Flagstaff. The judge's jaw locked. Mr. Brown, were you involved in the processing of this document? Kody's lips opened, but the words didn't come out. Then, I was assured that it was a placeholder, legal convenience. Nothing was resolved, so you take responsibility for having known that it existed. Christine's voice cracked like a whip from the far side of the room. You knew that you had signed a forged document and shifted property from your ex-wife to your legally recognized wife without telling us. Robyn's head shook fiercely, the tears falling now. Not the emotive type, but those of a person finding themselves staring down the cell at the end of the corridor. I didn't know, she whispered. Swear to God, I didn't know. But no one answered her, because the courtroom was no longer seeing a betrayal. It was seeing a possible crime. The judge slammed down his gavel. I am calling for an investigation of this document as a fraud. All concerned parties will produce communication records, email logs, and bank statements immediately. This court will not tolerate signature forgeries under marriage law. Janelle did not go back to her seat. She looked at Kody with a sadness that was more visceral than rage. You forged my name, she said, and you didn't think I'd catch on. Kody stared back at her, speechless, slumped, exposed, and in that moment the illusion of polygamy's great patriarch quietly passed away before all of them. No rousing speech, no redemption storyline for season 19. A man trapped by the falsehoods he constructed prevaricates to get out for decades. Season 20 wouldn't be therapeutic, it would be vengeance. All by now, the courtroom had ceased being a legal process, and more of an archaeological excavation. Layer upon layer of deceptions dug up with each witness, each page, each gasp that rung out in the room. But nothing had readied them for what Christine was going to reveal next. She reached quietly back into her binder again, going to a thick section labeled Pre-LC. This was not about the show. This was about the groundwork that Kody had been doing quietly long before the camera started rolling. Your Honor, she spoke flatly, we tracked a joint account that was created in 2008, 2 years before Sister Wives. It was signed Kenneth Rowe, with a Flagstaff address, no member of the family ever occupied. The bank account has received routine wire transfers, typically just shy of $10,000, every 15 years. The judge rolled his glasses up his nose, furrowing his brows. You think Mr. Brown established a secret financial conduit even before the family became public? I don't think so, Christine replied. We verified it. She handed on a trail of documents assembled by a forensic accountant, routing slips, routing numbers, snapshots of the accounts, and a typed ledger with income postings marked advancement, dividends, and eerily, wife offset. Janelle's eyes opened wide. Offset? Christine nodded. Payments paid to cover what Kody at one point called the emotional cost of working with disgruntled wives. He used our own money as leverage to shut us up. Even the judge lounged now, and this account remains open. Yes, Christine replied. The last payment 3 months ago from Brown Legacy Ventures. Robyn buried her face in her chest, green around the gills. I never saw that account, she murmured. But no one was listening, not anymore. Because what started as a family story had officially become a financial thriller, one with victims, a mastermind, and a mountain of evidence too overwhelming to ignore. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on any accounts tied to this pseudonym, the judge declared. This court will subpoena the full transaction history and all communications surrounding Brown Legacy Ventures and its offshoots. Kody didn't speak. For the first time in 2 hours, he looked truly afraid. Not angry, not performative, just raw, cornered fear. The kind a man feels when he realizes the net isn't closing. It's already closed. Meri's eyes never left the documents. Janelle looked like she wanted to scream. Robyn appeared to want to disappear. Christine, however, simply exhaled, because this wasn't vengeance, this was discovery. Season 19 was the residue. Season 20. It was going to be the reckoning that seeped all the way back to the beginning line. Christine issued no pronouncement. She didn't pontificate. She simply reached into her binder and pulled out a single sealed envelope, ancient, a bit yellow along the edges, and stamped with a date even earlier than the pilot episode of the show itself, the 11th of March, 2009. The courtroom all drew in a collective breath. Even the judge straightened up, his gaze narrowing by a fraction. "What is that?" he demanded. Christine held it up without hesitation. "This is the original signing of Kody's private spousal agreement," she said. "The one he made us both sign before TLC ever showed up on our doorstep. It was never legally filed, but it was used as leverage to intimidate and isolate us whenever we would ask about money, property, or decision-making rights. We were told we were partners, but this document made us liabilities." Janelle leaned in, clearly confused. Meri's lips parted in recognition. Robyn blinked in surprise. "I never saw that," she thought, but too late. The envelope had already been opened. Christine handed the contents of the envelope to the court clerk. A number of written pages, notarized, signed by all 4 wives, and Kody. Under this document, the judge read out, "Both wives agreed to abandon all claims to family income or property other than weekly living allowances, except with patriarchal sanction." He scrunched his face. "And you all signed this?" "Yes," Christine answered. "They told us it was because of the tax, that it would help the family for development purposes. But really, it was a gag order. We weren't wives. We were unpaid labor under a patriarch's guise." Kody finally spoke up. "That contract was never enforced." He snarled. "It was token." The judge still didn't meet his eye. "So why was it kept secret? Why weren't the wives ever given copies? Why do all financial decisions of the past 14 years overlap with this document's stipulations?" Kody stammered. "Because it was easier to manage." Christine cut in. "Easier to control." One sentence stood out in the paper. "In case of litigation or dissolution, no wife shall publicly degrade the patriarch or lose support." The judge's expression darkened. "This isn't symbolic. This is coercive." Janelle cringed aghast. Meri wiped away tears, years of emotional blur turning concrete before her eyes. Robyn now had her hands on the side of the seat, mouth open. "I'm ordering a judicial review of this document's legality," the judge announced. "If proven coercive, this may not only void asset clauses, it could open the door for criminal liability." The courtroom wasn't breathing anymore. Christine folded her hands, calm, composed, finished. "Season 19 showed a man unraveling," she said quietly. "But what we failed to say then was that he had been in possession of a leash the whole time. And that did it. No longer impartial, no longer aloof. He was involved, and Kody Brown, for the first time in his life as a public figure, was not simply being questioned. He was being cornered by the very truth he had thought he had put into a signature and an envelope." Season 20 would not just be a season, it would be the trial of everything he had built. The judge had just made the whole courtroom uncomfortable with his ruling to consider Kody's coercive pre-show contract, when suddenly Meri stood again, quietly, serenely, but clutching something in her hand. It was not a folder. It was not a binder. It was one picture and a crumpled legal envelope no other wife had ever seen. Christine looked over, stunned. Janelle raised an eyebrow. Even Robyn blinked in disbelief. Because this wasn't rehearsed, not even improvised, Meri proceeded forward and placed both items on the judge's bench in silence. "Explain," he asked softly. Meri looked straight ahead, voice steady and quiet. "That photograph was taken in October 2015. It's me, Kody, and our attorney, meeting at a private office in Lehi, Utah. He just convinced me to legally divorce him so he could adopt Robyn's children. He told me it was temporary, that I'd always be his legal wife, that it was just paperwork." The courtroom sat still. Even Christine looked shaken. But that envelope, Meri continued, nodding toward the second item, contains a post-divorce affidavit Kody made me sign, one in which I am relinquishing all legal claims on our shared property because, and these are his very words, the restructuring of the family requires sacrifice from the loyal. The judge opened it and read quickly. His eyebrows shot up. Miss Brown, were you represented by independent counsel? No, Meri said. Kody arranged for the lawyer. Told it was normal, I trusted him. Her eyes glowed but did not crack, and when I insisted on a copy, he said I should leave it alone. That if I cared about the family, I would leave it alone. The judge's fingers stopped moving. This paper releases you from any entitlement to Coyote Pass, Brown Ventures, or any show residuals after 2016. Right, Meri said, and I didn't realize what I signed away until season 19, when I saw every money door close behind me. Kody let out a sour snort. You wanted out. You were always 1 foot out the door. Undefined, Meri stood facing him, steel now filling in for sorrow. Undefined, no, Kody. Undefined was always 1 foot back in, begging to be let close. You just wanted a fall wife to cover up what you were doing with Robyn. Undefined, I let you use me. Robyn covered her mouth. Undefined Christine looked down, her face almost in pain. Undefined Janelle's eyes brimmed with something stronger than anger. Recognitionist class the judge spoke guardedly now. Toto, this affidavit can amount to contract coercion and fiduciary abuse, especially if the attorney was not acting impartially. He turned to Kody. You are now being investigated for possible exploitation under marital fraud statute, section 134.3. Those mere 8 words radically altered the rhythm of the courtroom. Undefined it was no longer merely a divorce after. Effect or dispute over property. Define property it was now a courtroom very much turning its eye away from testimony, towards indictment. Define property and Meri. Once the overlooked wife, had just positioned herself in the very middle of a legal tempest she never sought, but at last ceased avoiding. In season 20, she wouldn't be a footnote. She'd be a witness, and maybe a key to all the others we're still discovering. Janelle didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. The courtroom had already absorbed bombshell after bombshell. Christine's binder, Robyn's blind admissions, Meri's betrayal, and Kody's sealed agreements. But it was Janelle, ever the quiet strategist, who had held back her most damning piece until everyone else had folded their cards. She stood up slowly, a plain silver laptop clutched in her hand like a weapon tempered from years of silence. Your Honor, she started. What I am going to show was never intended to be. She connected the laptop to the courtroom screen. 1 click, and there it was, a restored folder titled CP Shelter, Fay MGMT Fay Private, with a date modified only days prior to the start of season 19 production. This folder, said Janelle, was in a Dropbox account that was associated with Brown Ventures, but it had been deleted prior to our breakup. What Kody wasn't aware of is that I had admin access from when we filed taxes together in 2017. And what I found in it changes everything. She opened the folder. There were dozens of spreadsheets, each of which bore code. Name titles like Red House, Buffer Stipend, Shadow Payouts, and most ominously of all, Optics Management. The courtroom sat in shocked unison as she opened one such spreadsheet titled Share Adjustments, Fay Christine Departure Draft. This was created 2 weeks before Christine told us she was leaving, Janelle clarified, and it shows money being moved before she announced it publicly. He was planning for her to be gone and crunching financials in the background behind our backs to balance. Christine's head snapped up. He knew? Janelle nodded. He always knew. That is why the crew was at your rental the morning you left. He fed them the schedule. He was tracking the narrative in a spreadsheet. The judge leaned forward, now keen. And these were never disclosed in any asset reports. That is correct, Janelle confirmed. Most were buried under dummy expense line items, equipment rentals, per diem, attorney's fees, but cross-reference the routing numbers. They all lead back to the same holding account under Robyn's second LLC. Robyn exclaimed out loud, No, I didn't see this, but the math wasn't interested in her tears. The equations formed a picture her denials couldn't refute. The judge turned to Kody. Mr. Brown, this level of concealment, along with demonstrated income redistribution of marital revenue, constitutes willful misrepresentation. This isn't a matter of sloppy accounting. This is evasion that is methodical. Kody didn't say a word. He couldn't. His face had gone white, lips compressed, fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. Headlines were likely already being crafted outside. Inside, reality had at last caught up with fantasy. "I'm freezing all remaining Brown Ventures digital assets pending investigation," the judge said firmly. "And I'm requesting a third-party audit of every financial document tied to this folder." Christine leaned over and whispered something to Janelle, just one word finally. Because this wasn't just courtroom drama anymore. This was evidence on screen, undeniable, unforgivable. Season 20 wouldn't be about rebuilding or co-parenting or whatever buzzwords Kody hoped to spin. It would be about exposure, one finance line item at a time, and Janelle, underestimated for so long, had just delivered the one thing no one else could, the receipts he thought were lost forever. The courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was somber. Everyone who sat there knew they had all just witnessed the death of something much greater than a family feud. Janelle's revived folder did not simply validate suspicion. It painted a blueprint of conscious deceit, tacit collusion, and calculated financial betrayal. Christine had the documents. Meri had the doctored court record. Robyn, the most pitiable character now, had nothing but her disillusionment. And Kody? Kody had nothing but the crumbling structure of a role he could no longer perform. The judge stood, final documents in hand. "This court will be in recess shortly," he said, "but I am going to be issuing a formal injunction prohibiting Mr. Brown and his associated entities from moving, withdrawing, or otherwise accessing any monies or properties pending forensic audit. Further, Christine Brown's allegations of financial abuse will proceed to preliminary hearings, as will Meri Brown's complaint of contract coercion. This case is no longer civil only. It will soon be criminal." Kody flinched, not at the legal consequences, but at the reality finally spoken aloud in a room that mattered. The cameras waiting outside the courthouse had no idea yet what had just happened, but they soon would. Season 19 would not conclude with a TLC confessional or a voiceover of Kody talking about his journey, but with a legal injunction and a pile of incriminating exhibits. The wives didn't come out one by one, they emerged one by one. And now the family wasn't devastated, it was obliterated. Christine was the first to exit the courtroom, binder still in her hand, her lawyer trailing after her with a satisfied nod. Janelle was next, laptop tucked under her arm, whispering to her son on the phone that she'd be home soon. Meri crept quietly, a little smile tugging at her mouth. Not in triumph, but because after all these years of waiting for someone else to do it, she had finally chosen herself. Robyn sat, unsure whether to rise and go with Kody or sit and face the rest of it on her own. But Kody? He simply sat, his eyes glued to the seal of the court as though it mocked him. No cameras, no edits, no producer to cut away from the scene, just consequences, and as Sister Wives Season 19 melted into its darkest finale to date, fans wouldn't be left with an emotional family dinner or bittersweet goodbye. They'd be left with court filings, bank records, and a patriarch finally revealed. The Season 20 promo. A tight shot of Christine outside the courtroom, holding onto her binder like a sword. The narrator's voice, low, deliberate, cut through the silence. He built the family on secrets. Now the truth gets its season. The screen faded to black tallywhackering soon. Season 20, The Trial of Kody Brown. Because sometimes the finale isn't the end, it is just the beginning of the real story.